Hey guys, welcome to a very special episode of That News Show. I am your host, Chase Bunker. Joining me today, he is a sideline reporter for ESPN's NBA broadcast. You can also see him on Around the Horn, the sports reporters, former writer of the Palm Beach Post and the Miami Herald. And you can hear his radio show, weeknights from 9 to 11, called Jorge and Izzy on ESPN Radio. It is Israel Gutierrez. Izzy, how are you?
Good, man. How are you?
Doing great. Let's talk some NBA real quick. I want to talk about my home team, Orlando Magic, because let's face it, we've just been awful since the Dwight Mayer. And since the whole small ball revolution came about, they were pretty much just like, bleep this. Let's get Bismack Biyombo, trade for Serge Ibaka, and pretty much get a whole bunch of big men. How do you think Orlando will do against this whole small ball revolution?
That's a good question. I really like Frank Vogel. I'll start there. I just think he's one of the more sort of underrated coaches, I'd say. Didn't really get enough credit, I thought, for what he did in Indiana. And so I think primarily the defense is going to be good. And if you've got a team built really on size and some of that athleticism that they have up front with Biyombo and Vucevic and Elfrid Payton in the backcourt, and so I do think that they're going to probably be one of the better defenses. Whether that means they can hang and, win games against some of these higher scoring teams, the Warriors and the Spurs and whatnot, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but I do think it's a good start. And, certain young guys decide to, Hazonia decides to really flourish, then you might see something of a playoff team, but I think you're probably looking at not the most exciting team in the world. And so if they win, it's going to be defensively and, maybe sneak their way into the playoffs.
All right, so you think we might actually have a chance to make the playoffs?
I mean, listen, there's always going to be one or two teams that you didn't expect going in. And if you're going to tell me that Frank Vogel can turn this team into, a defensive team that can win 40, 41 games and fight for an 8th spot, I maybe will buy that.
All right. So it's not my bias isn't showing on that. Awesome. You saw a lot of big contracts this year. What was the most outlandish contract that you saw?
Oof. I don't even know if there was one in particular, because what happened, they just all started to just meld together because they were all giant contracts that seemed out of control. I remember sort of having reactions to Kent Bazemore's deal, there was a couple other deals for just kind of middle of the rotation guys that were just kind of shocking. But I would say the whole experience, it wasn't the deal itself, it was just this idea right here and this didn't have anything to do with this new year or this salary cap bump or anything else. It was just the idea of somebody with the experience of Hassan Whiteside essentially holding Pat Riley hostage in the first day of negotiations, saying, I have to get this deal done now. And Pat Riley sort of giving in to a guy who's got 1.5 years of experience basically in the league and giving him $100 million and risking losing his franchise player. And eventually did lose his franchise player. So that whole concept to me was just kind of what stood out more so than just the big numbers. Because like I said, A, we anticipated the big numbers. B, somebody had to get the money. And then there were so many of them that it just kind of started to, feel normal again.
Speaking of Dwayne Wade, of course, Dwayne Wade leaves Miami, and that's probably one of the bigger stories of the whole offseason.
Right.
When was the last time Miami felt like this kind of pain with someone leaving?
I would say 16 years ago, and it wasn't voluntarily. That was when Alonzo Mourning came down was diagnosed with the kidney ailment, kidney disease, and it turned what was supposed to be a championship run for that year with a rebuilt roster into just a big giant question mark. It was devastating for the franchise and for the city. Because they'd gotten, not necessarily that close, but they'd gotten to an Eastern Conference Finals. They'd banged their head against the wall against the Knicks for years and years, and then it was here's Brian Grant, Eddie Jones, Anthony Mason, take Alonzo Mourning, Tim Hardaway, try to get past whoever you need to. And, so that kind of just shook the entire organization and the city. But there really wasn't the type of connection there is now, 3 championships later. So this probably has never been felt down here, especially with the NBA, because the closest thing would have been Dan Marino leaving before he was done. And even if he'd gone to Minnesota that last year, wouldn't have felt like this. So probably nothing close to this other than maybe LeBron leaving, but that was just kind of a 4-year puff of smoke. And then everybody was just like, wait, what happened?
Right. That's understandable. Well, if you need any advice on how to cope with losing players, I lost Superman twice, so yeah, I can give you some pointers after the show. What would you say? Like, you've covered the NBA for a number of years. What is the one fan base that you really hate dealing with?
Hate dealing with. I've never hated dealing with any fan base in particular. Like I think New York fans get a hard time for being seemingly unrealistic or over the top with their expectations and entitled and all that stuff. And I don't really see that in my interactions with Knicks fans. San Antonio Spurs fans kind of hated me for a while, so that wasn't really fun to deal with them. Even though all I said was in 2012 that they weren't going to win a championship, and they didn't win the championship, and yet all of a sudden I'm a Spurs hater. But that kind of I had fun with that, and that kind of bubbled over, and then just turned into nothing after a little bit. But there's really a fan base I don't like dealing with. Anybody that's based in Miami is going to get blowback from Cavaliers fans if they say anything negative or even close to negative about LeBron James. So we kind of expect that, but I don't really say a whole lot that I think is either negative or outlandish or disagreeable about LeBron, really. It's just, said same things I've said about him for years. So, there's no fan base I really don't like dealing with.
What was the most right you were on with somebody, or what was the most wrong you are about somebody or a
The most
team?
wrong is easy. The most wrong is easy was James Harden. That was when he moved from Oklahoma City to Houston. I'd experienced a lot of not great play from James Harden, especially in person. When he was in Miami for the NCAA tournament his last year at ASU, watched him really just play terribly. And I thought as a star player, he would be he would just be an inefficient, not really especially great defensive player. But I didn't factor in a lot of the savvy that he has and just how good of a shooter he is and his ability to just really read the game. And because a lot of the times I saw the opposite. I saw a guy who struggled in that regard. So that one I've never been more wrong on. Who have I ever been more? I'm going to have to think about that one for a second because there's not really a whole lot people can brag on with that one. Because if guys are supposed to be good, then
or if you knew that like this person wouldn't thrive, like that you were at least right that he's like, yeah, I called that. I knew this person was going to succeed, or I knew this person would thrive in this atmosphere. I know the hard hitting questions.
Yeah, it's just the ones that like I'm more concerned. Like how people say losing hurts more than winning feels good.
Sometimes, yeah.
Well, I don't necessarily remember the victories, like in terms of things that I've called or predicted, as much as I kind of like cringe at the ones that I got wrong. And I'm just thinking, why did I get those wrong? So I don't really have, like, if in the course of this interview, I might come to think of one. I'll let you know, but I don't really have anything that kind of sticks out.
Feel free to like spout out like mid conversation. You've also done, like I said earlier, you're a sideline reporter. What was the best game that you've ever watched, or that you were ever on the sidelines that you got to cover?
It's a couple of good ones. The first year that I did it, which was not, I think, 3 seasons ago, Warriors and Dallas were playing at Oracle, and the Warriors had a crazy comeback in that game, and that was a lot of fun. I would say probably the most memorable was it was at least 2 overtimes. It might have been, I think it was 3 overtimes between the Spurs and Lakers, and it happened to be the day after Kobe kind of had that moment in practice where he yelled at Mitch Kupchak and said these guys are soft as Charmin and all this stuff. And so not only did the Lakers win the game, surprisingly, but Kobe. I got to talk to Kobe afterward, and he was great on the subject. And so it was a great game, a great subject to follow, a great storyline, and a great interview after. And so that's probably the most memorable game in San Antonio, ironically, where people tend to hate me.
Yeah. When you, I'm assuming when you went to University of Florida, you became a writer. Did you ever think in that future, like in that near future, you would be in ESPN?
No, it wasn't even on my radar. Like when I was leaving college, I remember being asked, I believe it was by a professor, where I'd want to be in 10 years. And I said 10 years, if I'm covering an NBA team for a major metro newspaper, I'd be very happy. And so I was doing that within like 10 months. And so it didn't really, like I stopped kind of setting goals at any point. Like I just said, all right, let me see, because, by the time I was 22, I was covering Major League Baseball. By the time I was 23, I was covering NBA basketball. And it was just like, it's all coming kind of quickly, so let me just kind of ride the wave and see what happens. And I'm not going to set any goals because maybe there's a ceiling there, and maybe I'm, setting those too low. So I'm just going to kind of, and, there also was this, I think one of the running themes with me is me having to prove myself to myself. And so maybe I didn't have a ton. Can I curse in this, by the way?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I probably didn't have like a shit ton of confidence the entire time.
There's no kids that are going to watch this. So.
And so I would have to sort of teach myself what it was that maybe other people might be seeing in me. And so I wasn't going to say, hey, I can be on ESPN, because I never thought for a second I could. And so, the more I just kept going and the more confidence that kind of grew in me, the more, the better I'd get at certain things. And then I would just jump to the next element of it. And then, 2006, I would say between like 2004 and 2006, a bunch of TV spots came available, like, for ESPN News and SportsCenter when Shaq and Dwayne were here. And then that kind of introduced me a little bit to the camera and them to me. And then by 2008, when I became a columnist for the Herald, it was just, Around the Horn called, Sports Reporters called, and it all of a sudden became like an in-studio thing where I could be on a studio show. And things just kind of grew from there. But it was all sort of anchored around my writing, and now I'm not even writing as much as I used to, or hardly any, to be honest. So it's just kind of a weird growth pattern that I never would have predicted, but ended up turning out great so far.
Do you remember your first time on camera?
First time? Damn, that is a hell of a question.
Yeah.
No.
We're getting deep here.
I swear on my life, I do not remember the first time on camera. I remember my first time doing Sports Reporters. Mm-hmm. I literally don't remember my first show on Around the Horn. I remember like one ESPN News hit in particular with David Lloyd, and we were doing it from the arena, Miami American Airlines Arena. And I think when we were done, toward the end of the interview, he just said something like, "Yeah, you look like a natural holding that microphone." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool, thanks." And then I just started thinking, "Hey, maybe there is something to me doing TV or what have you." So those are one of my first few, I would say, handful, but it wasn't. I can't remember my first one. No.
All right. I just remember seeing you on Around the Horn for the first time. I was like, oh, from ESPN Miami. It's like, oh, they can actually reach out to us now. They can reach out to us in Florida, and when it's not full of crazy news stories and hurricanes.
Right.
Yeah. What would you say was the biggest difference? You said you covered MLB as well. What was the biggest difference going from covering an MLB team to an NBA team?
Well, one sport I loved and the other one I didn't. That's the biggest difference. It's funny when they asked me, because like I said, I was 22 years old. I had been working at the Palm Beach Post for 3 weeks, and they were in the midst of a Marlins beat writer searching for a writer. And so after a little bit of time, like after 3 weeks of me being there, they kind of came to me and said, "Do you want to cover the Marlins?" And I'm like, never going to say no, right? You always say yes, and then you figure it out from there. And so I remember that night going to the bookstore and just because my biggest concern, even though I watched baseball and I enjoyed baseball, my biggest concern was not really knowing how to talk baseball, because I didn't really know about pitches and grips and stuff like that. And so I thought, wow, I'm going to feel like I'm just going to feel like an outsider out there inside that clubhouse talking to people, and they're going to tell I don't really like the sport or don't know the sport rather, despite liking it. And by the way, my team was the Marlins, so that was kind of tough
Yeah.
to just all of a sudden be at arm's distance and not really be able to cheer them on. But so the difference being, yeah, I just loved. Oh wait, did I even get to that point? So I went to a bookstore and I started getting books on buying book. I bought like 2 or 3 books on just baseball and lingo and pitching and stuff like that. And I read some of that stuff, and then I realized, what am I doing here? Like, this is a lot of unnecessary, panicky stuff. And so just started doing that. And the thing that was most helpful, it was a young team and not a lot of known players, not a lot of veteran egos or anything like that. And so I kind of was able to, there was really good other beat writers there too that would help me out, because they're like, wait a second, this 22-year-old kid's covering the Marlins? Like, what the hell's the world gotten to? Like, whatever happened to paying your dues? But they were really cool because, they liked me, and so they helped me out a lot too. But once I got to the NBA, it was difficult, don't get me wrong, because like I said, the Alonzo Mourning thing, that was literally my first experience covering the Heat. Like,
Oh, wow.
I get there in the first week, it's, oh no, Alonzo Mourning has this kidney ailment, and I'm like, wow, this is throwing me into the fire. And so it was tough, but in terms of the basketball part of it, it never was. And so that was the biggest difference.
Nice. You can follow him on Twitter at Izzy Gutierrez. Is there anyone at ESPN that swears a lot once the camera shut off? Or the microphones for radio purposes?
Everyone? Who curses a lot, but it's hilarious when the camera's not rolling is Woody Page.
Really?
Yeah. Everybody else will just drop their, the curse words every now and then, but it's just funny the way Woody curses. It comes with a certain tone and a certain hilarity.
I picture him like also dropping like old-timey phrases as well before he starts swearing.
No, that's not him necessarily. I would say Bill Plaschke would be more likely to drop like an old-timey
That's
phrase.
true.
Like
Yeah,
that.
that's true.
But, or like a Bob Ryan or a Mike Lupica or something.
Maybe. You mentioned that your team was the Marlins when you covered them.
Right.
Was it hard being in the press box, like trying to contain like some of the excitement, or do you get to at least like be a little bit loud?
Like, I got to credit, the people that I worked with at the University of Florida and, my classmates who sort of taught me the ropes there, because you learn pretty early that, if you can find a way to distance yourself from your collegiate team, like the one that you're almost literally paying to be a fan of, if you can sort of show objectivity and, keep an arm's distance there and not be a fan, I think through just 2 years of that training, if you will, just made it easy for everything else. So I was like, oh, I'm covering the Marlins? Cool. They're indifferent. But it was a little easier, too, because they just weren't very good.
All right. So another big thing that came out 1 year ago, almost 1 year ago today, we're getting up there, you officially came out as a gay man, especially in the sports world. Was that difficult, especially covering something that is so male-driven, straight
Right.
masculinity style? Yeah.
That I don't know what it is about the whole experience, but that part of it wasn't really a factor to me, if you think about it. Like, if I think about it, it was more, I guess I'd been covering the league for long enough and been in sports long enough and been around this particular group of coworkers long enough that I knew that it wasn't going to be an issue from that perspective. Like, I never thought I would have an issue walking into a locker room or doing an interview or, just shooting the shit with a player or anything like that. I never thought that any of that would be an issue. And maybe that was a little naive, or maybe that was, 15 years of reinforcement in that league of just, knowing the people in it.
That's
And
true.
so, and knowing, how we've kind of grown over the past several decades on this issue in particular. And so that part was never a problem for me. It was more just everyday people. It was a really weird feeling in that respect. Like, you go outside and people know you, but they also know a lot about you. And it's just, So you don't know how people you've never met before are going to react, or how their thought processes are going to change, if they change at all, after reading that and knowing that about you. And I think part of my whole reasoning for even doing it in a public way wasn't just to get it out there. Like, look, I was going to get married, so I was going to either have to explain this ring every day, or, individually, or I could just get it all out in one fell swoop. And so part of the great timing for me on the issue was, even though I'd waited so long to do it, people got to know me. I developed a personality on the air, whether it be radio, television, or even in print. And I've given people, not given people, but people have had ample time to sort of make judgments on me professionally and personally, if they felt like it, without knowing that. And then, after knowing that, if it made them sort of reassess things one way or the other, whether it be, oh, I didn't know that about him, I don't like him, or it was, I didn't know that about him, that makes me sort of think twice of how I stereotype or categorize a gay man. And so all those things ended up being, timing-wise, good for me, or good for the situation, if you will. But it's still really tough. Like, the longer I waited, the more it became not necessarily comfortable. I guess the longer I waited, the more difficult it became, just flat out, because even in the situation where you wanted people to know, like, let's say anybody I worked with on Around the Horn or sports reporters, you also get that feeling of, man, like, if I tell them now, they're going to be like, well, why didn't you have the confidence to tell me earlier, or something like that. So everything about that was tough. And the part about the masculinity of covering sports, and that wasn't very high on my list.
Do you ever wish that you came out sooner? Or did you felt like when you did, like, that was
Well,
the
it's
more
hard for me
appropriate
to
time?
say that, because so many things have gone well, and I've always been a right time, right place kind of person. Like, I consider my entire career to be 85% luck. For example, small example, when I interviewed at the Miami Herald, at the time, the executive sports editor probably wouldn't have chosen me to replace Ethan Skolnick and hire the Heat and cover the Heat, and might not have hired me. Just so happened that when I did interview, he was on 2-week vacation, and the deputy sports editor was a fan, and he hired me. And so, as the saying goes, the rest is history. And so I've never really second guessed the timing of stuff, because who knows what would have happened if I would have done it earlier. Maybe people wouldn't have listened to me the way they might now. Or if, I'd done it earlier, maybe I wouldn't have met, David, or maybe I wouldn't have succeeded in my career, as well. So I don't even give it a second thought. Like, I just know that in terms of my family, I've had a great relationship with them from start, until now, and nothing changed before or after. It's been fantastic. So nothing would have changed had I told them earlier. And I've always sort of realized that I picked my friends sort of subconsciously, knowing that once I did tell them, nothing would change. And, I just make sure that it's really good people that I'm friends with. So in that respect, I've always had great friends and great family. So there was one thing missing. There was that, sort of, whatever you want to call it, the romantic element of your life. And so, but it wasn't nearly as much of a void for me as people would think. And because I had so many other boxes checked and filled, and was happy in those respects. So I just think everything kind of worked out for a reason. And it was just balance in my life before that, just enough to where I didn't have to feel any pressure to do so. And then it just so happens that when the time came, it was the right time, and it was a great time in my life. And I think a lot of people responded to seeing that from me. So yeah, I think it was. I'm never going to second guess the timing of it.
That's good.
I mean, because what's the point, right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's
what am
true.
I going to do? Just go back in time and say, "Hey, I'm 30 years old now. Let me go tell everybody." There's no point in that. And when you say that things have, and when you see, in my perspective, that things have worked out as great as they have so far in just the last year, like you mentioned, then yeah, there's no reason to second guess.
You just celebrated your first gay pride parade not too long ago, or gay pride event, I should say, not too long ago at Fort Lauderdale. What was that like for you? Because not only first time as a gay man, this was after the Pulse shooting. This was your first time as a married couple as well. Like, what was
Well,
that experience like for you?
technically, okay, I think that might have been like misinterpreted a little bit. Um, what Fort Lauderdale Pride was my first Pride as an openly gay man and
Mm,
as a married man, and
okay.
it so happened to come after the Orlando thing. The funny part about the Pride thing is I'd never been to a Pride my entire life until after meeting David, and then so I went from meeting him to flying back home from Phoenix to 2 weeks later telling my family to a week after that going to San Francisco Pride on my birthday with him. So I went from like being closeted and terrified probably to being out in a to my family and at a gay pride in San Francisco, which was kind of a crazy 3 week jump there, if you will. But that one in itself in Fort Lauderdale this past June was just it was made entirely different because, like I said, the first one for me open and out and married, but also coming after the Pulse thing, and it was just so many emotions, and it was there was a weightiness to it. You could feel it wasn't the same type of atmosphere because I've been to a few here in Fort Lauderdale, walked the streets, and then kind of went home and as it goes on into all hours of the night, but. There was a little bit of a different vibe to it. There was a little bit of a fear factor in there, but it was more just of a little sense of just bringing the happiness down a little bit of depression in there. And I think what was missing, and this probably just had to do with as much of the weather as it did with safety concerns, but there wasn't really as many families as there used to be, like over the years that I've experienced it, where early on in the day, especially before the parade, when there's just kind of people walking down the street, and then during the parade, you'll see some families, you'll see kids with their parents and stuff, and I just didn't see a whole heck of a lot this time. But I don't know how much of that had to do with fear from after the Pulse shooting, or how much of it had to do with the weather not being great, but it definitely sort of took away a little bit from the environment that I'd been used to over the last few years.
Um, when you came out, did you ever feel like you had to, like, there was a certain stereotype that you tried to not be associated with?
No, no. And one of the things that I told everybody, either individually or via group, about me when I came out was I've never not been me. Like, I've never not tried to be somebody else for the sake of hiding the fact that I was gay, because that's what really confused me about the whole situation to begin with. It's like, wait a second, I believed in the stereotypes. I don't fit any of those stereotypes, so I can't possibly be this. So it's kind of reinforced itself over and over again until I was probably in flat denial at some point in my 20s. And so that I never changed anything about myself purposely, because I think that would be disingenuous and inauthentic. And I think that's what is most important, that people see, is an authenticity in someone. And so when I say, the things that bother me, or the things that, affected me growing up, or, going over this whole situation, or going through this whole situation, there isn't even like a twinge of, doubt, or a twinge of, hey, this is an act, or this is for attention. No, it's just, I've been me the entire time, and I think people can see that for the most part.
Okay. Was there somebody that was the hardest for you to come out, or did you have trouble coming out to a certain family
Mhm.
member?
Um, so I don't think my family was that difficult per se because I knew that how they would take it, and I knew that we had such great relationships that it was, while they might be a little surprised, that it was never going to be something that would affect our relationship whatsoever. I did worry about my mom a little bit in terms of she kind of internalizes a lot, and if she were worried about me, she wouldn't really know how to express it. And that happened probably a couple days after, she. Uh, I had to talk to her all over again and sort of let her know that there wasn't anything to worry about. And she was like, okay, so she was fine. But oddly enough, I would say probably the two, and I don't even know why I say oddly, but the two most difficult people individually, one was my barber, which is really weird because I've been going to the same guy since 2000. And, I love the atmosphere. It's classic barbershop stuff. He's a very devout Christian and is in, I believe the choir, or, plays music for his church and everything else. And, I hear them talk a lot, and they're just really good people, him and his friends. And I hear them talk religion a lot. And I don't think I've ever overheard them saying anything negative about gays, but I do know that they're all typically masculine straight guys, and so it always made me wonder, just how much he's tied into his religion, because if that would have affected the way we interact, then I wouldn't want him to be my barber anymore. And then that's something that was just, it's a weird little dynamic there. And I guess the one that was easily the toughest was my best friend Warren from high school. He was in my wedding. And it's just because of that, it's because we were boys for years and years. And the weirdest thing about it is there's like this distance. Him and his wife live in D.C. or around in Virginia, just outside of D.C. And his wife just did kind of some Facebook detective work and found some stuff. And so he just gave me a call one day, and it was tough. Like, it was just tough. I don't even know why, but it was.
I want to ask you this. It was a situation I had about a few years ago. One of my friends who I've known since 7th grade,
Right.
he came out to me just randomly. He's like, "Yeah, Chase, I'm gay. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then we just started talking. Like, is that technically like the appropriate reaction, or am I kind of a bit of a dick for just being like, "Oh,
No,
whatever"?
I mean, I don't know. Like, people shouldn't have an expectation on how somebody's going to react because you just don't know how they're going to react. Like, I wouldn't. I mean, unless it was over the top swing in one direction, like in the negative direction, I'm guessing is where people would be shocked. But it's not like you should be prepared for that or know how to react on that.
Yeah.
But, if he's a good friend, I would say eventually you probably want to talk it out and at least have him be able to express the things that he's gone through.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it'll help you understand him better and vice versa. But in terms of like, the reaction, I wouldn't say that that's anything dickish, if you will.
Okay. I was just, well, it wasn't like I don't understand him. It was just like, oh, all right, whatever. You want to go play Smash? We'll do that. But I just don't shower with you anymore. That's all. um, I don't know what it is, and maybe pardon my ignorance on this.
Mm.
Um, one of the more recent examples was like when Ellen Page came out, social media just kind of blew up. Like, oh my gosh! Like, is that the appropriate reaction that we should be having, or should we just kind of like do the typical, or do like what I just
I
kind of did with?
think, I mean, well,
If
first
you
of
know
all,
what I'm saying.
react however you feel, right?
Yeah,
Nobody's supposed to tell you how to react.
that's
But
true.
I would say it's it's sort of an acknowledgement of a very difficult thing. And so if you, especially somebody that's in the public eye,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's not so much, hey, that's great, as if it was any different than being heterosexual. It's, hey, that's great that you are confident enough in who you are that you can talk about it now, that,
Mm-hmm.
there isn't anything lingering over you or any dark cloud or anything like that. And so it's just an acknowledgement of how of that accomplishment, basically, because it is a personal accomplishment. I can, speak
Mm-hmm.
firsthand.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's probably the type of reaction you get.
Um, let's go like a little bit deeper into like, you know, your history and everything. When was the first time you realized that you were gay?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that
All
question.
right.
I mean, it was probably. I mean, I don't mean to, you know, I don't mean to say anything about the question. I just don't know.
Yeah.
Never, and who knows? That could be one of those issues where I didn't want to know, therefore I forgot. You know what I'm saying? But no idea.
All right. Um, I'm trying to word this one properly as well,
Mhm.
because again, part of my
You know what?
ignorance.
Sorry, if
Uh,
you worded it improperly, I'll let you know,
all
but
right.
not in a bad way. Like I'll just let you know, hey, that's probably not great.
Yeah. How do you think the media handled Michael Sam? Do you think that like they went too much, too little? Like how should like, or was it just enough?
Um, See, it's funny because I don't think it's really a question of how the media handled Michael Sam. I think it's how Michael Sam handled the media, if you will. I don't know if he was prepared for that kind of attention, that kind of demands on his time. Um, you know, it was a lot that went into that. Like, that's a big deal. And I don't know if he was 100% prepared for it. And so, how the media reacted, which I thought was, like, I don't remember anything standing out as saying necessarily, hey, that was an inappropriate reaction or an unfair reaction or an over the top reaction. I think he got a lot of attention, but I think he deserved a lot of attention because it doesn't really matter the caliber of player you are necessarily. If you are in that environment and you are an NFL player and you are gay and you are open about it, you are experiencing it the same way. As the first open one, you would be experiencing it the same way as any other position player would or any caliber player would. And so it was a bold move by him again, but I just don't know if he was ready for all those demands on him and how it might have affected his play or how it might have affected him personally, which therefore, made him question a lot of things about football maybe or about his relationships or who knows. But you could just tell it was a burden on him. And so I think that might have scared off some people in terms of, man, like they're going to think I have to be a really good player to come out openly, and maybe you don't, but you do have to be very, very ready, and you do have to have a great support system around you, a solid one that's going to sort of guide you the right way. One of the things that I've learned and been fortunate enough with my timing of the situation is that I'm dealing with this stuff in my 30s. I don't know how I would be dealing with this if I was 22 years old, handling it right now. So I don't know how Michael Sam could have possibly handled the weight of that. And so that's what was so empowering about that whole idea, if you will, because he didn't even do it the smart way, if you will, wait to get drafted. It was courageous. It was, I say it about my husband all the time is, he came out to his family when he was like 11, 12 years old. And I don't even know if he knew then that they weren't really, open-minded that way and really had to be coerced into understanding. And it took them about a decade to do so. And so, I think of that as crazy courageous because that's not the way I would have done it. And frankly, it's not the way I would, it's not a way I could even have pictured, myself at that age having not only the courage to say it, but just the knowledge to understand, who I was and what I was. And so for Michael Sam to say, I don't care if I'm a fringe player necessarily. I don't care if I might literally lose money for this, but here you go. Before I get drafted, you should know this. And it was a big, huge deal. And it was very empowering for a lot of people. I just wish he was better prepared for it because it looks like it was a bad move. And that's bad enough. If anybody thinks it was a bad move, then it's going to sort of set back a few people who were probably maybe on the brink of saying something themselves.
Makes sense. Speaking of football, you are in a flag football league as well. I also play flag football.
Yep.
I'm better at defense. Do you think I could cover you, or are you going to outrun me?
I mean, not a chance, my man.
Whoa, they don't call me the White Richard Sherman for nothing. All right, no one calls me that. But nonetheless, what positions do you usually play?
I mean, it just depends. Like if we're playing in the league play here in Fort Lauderdale League, like I'll play anything. I'll play wide receiver. I'll play cornerback, safety, linebacker. If we're playing on the travel team, which is kind of the best of the best within our league, I'm more linebacker, and I'll play some slot receiver, and I'll play some actually on the line as kind of a hybrid, like lineman, tight end. And then, like, on the defensive end, we move stuff around. Like, I could play safety one possession. I could play rusher one possession. So we're kind of a utility knife, if you will, on the travel team.
Nice. Are you more the quiet reserve guy? What's that?
I said, but no, you couldn't cover me.
Oh, I almost want to say, come out to Orlando, one game. We will probably get killed, but I want to see if I can.
I'm afraid to run a 40. Like, I don't want to know what I run in the 40, because if I don't run what I want to run, I'm going to be upset. But I've run side by side with guys who have run fast 40s, and I've seen them do it. And so it leaves me confident that I'm pretty damn fast, even though I don't have the timer to tell me that I am.
Nice. Are you more of like the quiet reserve player, or are you, as soon as you catch one ball, you're in your face shouting at everybody?
No. In terms of like, the only thing that gets me going is poor officiating. That really angers me. And so that is what gets my emotions up. But if I'm rolling on, maybe if I get a sack or something, or if I get an interception, I'll celebrate a little bit. But nah, it's pretty much business, man. Like, unless I know the W is on the board, like I'm not celebrating too much or getting too emotional. I've got a couple teammates that are good enough at that as it is.
Are you like the anti-dick where like somebody like starts like shouting like they're the best, and all of a sudden like you beat them and it's like, oh, what now? And then you start taunting.
I mean, listen, in these tournaments, like these national, there's some ridiculous talent out there. So I'm not in position to trash talk anybody, whether they're talking to me or not. And frankly, our team has a little bit of a reputation and not a great one. And so I'm trying to keep everybody calm, because people try to egg us on. They try so hard to egg us on, and sometimes it works.
Nice. One last question before I go into my typical 10 that I ask everybody.
All right.
This would be like, man, we've gone so deep on this. This is like deep for even my taste. Do you have any advice for anybody who is struggling to come out?
You need to talk to someone. Talk to someone you trust. Talk to someone maybe that you don't even know, but that you can reach and knows that there's, like, I'd be willing to talk to people about anything if I have the time and if they can find a way to reach me. But I think that's probably the first way to go, is just talk to a neutral party, a third party. Let somebody, sort of walk you through what it might feel like when you tell them, or let you talk yourself through some of the things that you're struggling with. Because as somebody who's done it, a lot of the internal conversations, sometimes you have so much going on that you literally can't even express what it is that you feel, what it is that you want, what it is that you see and think and everything else. And so if you never actually say these things out loud, you might not even articulate it the way you want to. You might, you might not even express to other people the way you want them to. So you want them to hear it. So I would say, for starters, just talk to somebody. Somebody who, when you talk to them, it's just not really going to be a factor. Like the next day, you're not going to say, "Oh, I can't believe I told that person." And so it's almost like a practice run, if you will. And the other thing is just, man, and I know there's like, he can't even give people advice if they know that their family won't be okay with it. Like, there are people out there that just know, because of religion, because of, tradition, because of just the way they were raised, and not being, you just know that your parents or your family is just going to be, and those are the ones where I wish I knew what to say, but my suggestion is, like I said, go talk to somebody else, talk to a third party, and just get, see what it would feel like. and then prepare responses or prepare for certain things because it's not going to get any easier the more you wait.
All right. Well, as always, Israel, I appreciate you for coming on, especially telling your story. Now it's time for my 10 questions inspired by Inside the Actors Studios, James Lipton. James Lipton. Man, I wish I didn't butcher that name. What is your ringtone?
Oh, I think it's just a regular. Hang on. I think it's just a regular default ringtone. Ringtone. Opening. Yep.
That's not creative. You have like the whole world that you could choose from.
I know.
What is the most played song on your iPod?
Currently or of all time?
Yes.
I don't know if I have the all time anymore because I feel like when I switch to Apple Music, they change all that stuff. But I would say right now, the one that's been most played lately, for the last several months, I'd probably say "Feel No Ways" by Drake.
All right. What is your guilty pleasure band?
Guilty pleasure band or artist?
Either one.
I have a lot of guilty pleasure artists because I don't really care. Okay, so I'd probably be more specific. Guilty pleasure songs. Downtown fine. By Macklemore is a guilty pleasure song. Yeesh. I got a ton of those, though.
I know, hard-hitting questions.
Yeah, no, I would probably put that one up there as I scan through my iPod right now just to check. Guilty pleasures. Man. No, I'd say that's probably it.
All right.
I'd go with that one.
What's your favorite song that you love to just belt it out to, no matter how good or how bad you sound?
Well, I only belt out to songs if I feel like I sound good doing so. And that list is way too long. Like, there is no one single song that I'm just like, nope, because you can ask everybody that knows me. I'm a car singer. Like, I'm going to
There's nothing wrong with that.
And I drive alone so much that I end up like learning so many lyrics to things. And you probably listened to the Levitard show this week where I rapped an entire Drake lyric.
You did. Oh my gosh.
On the air. So there's just way too many songs that I'm comfortable belting out loud. So.
What is? Oh, actually, since there's so many, what's your go-to karaoke song?
Well, it's funny. I hadn't done karaoke in a while now. I think. The last time I did was actually, I take that back. I did one in LA. Joy Taylor, who's now going to be the moderator for Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp's new show. Like, we went out, a couple of other, Nick Wright from Fox, we were out, and I did did karaoke. I think I did Budapest by George Ezra, but I would say probably the one that I've done the most was Use Somebody by Kings of Leon. But I haven't done that one in years, just because that kind of wore out.
For some reason, I thought you were going to go with I Believe in a Thing Called Love by The Darkness. 'Cause that's my go-to one.
I would totally do that one.
Oh, my gosh. Next time you're in Orlando, we will find a karaoke bar and we will destroy the stage.
All right.
If you could eat one meal for a week without any health implications, what would it be?
Like the same meal?
The same
and over
meal.
For a week? Shoot. That's a good one. I would probably lean Italian, but with some sort of seafood involved.
Italian seafood.
Nope, screw it. I'm going to go with a carbonara, a pasta carbonara.
Yeah, I can get behind that. Favorite superhero?
You know what? I don't think anybody's ever asked me that one either. Favorite superhero.
Who would have thought these would have been the hard-hitting questions?
I know. Favorite superhero. I'm trying to think of when I was a kid, what I used to read more often. And I used to read this, I don't even remember the name of it. Such a lack of a better, I don't even want to say what I'm about to say. I know this sounds boring, but I'm going to go with Batman.
Nothing wrong with Batman.
Yeah.
To help settle a debate, is Mega Man a superhero?
Mega Man?
Yes.
Wait, which one's Mega Man?
The little video game guy, like half man, half robot, steals other people's abilities, destroys Dr. Wily or Sigma, depending on which series you're talking about.
Yes, superhero. If you can steal other people's powers, that means you have powers. You're a superhero.
Thank you. Take that, Matt.
It's Batman, though.
Oh gosh, is this the Mike and Mike argument we're gonna have right now?
Oh,
where
I don't know.
Oh,
Is that their argument?
they're saying like,
curious.
I think so.
His power is in.
I guess the same way that Iron Man is.
Justice. That's his power.
Is what?
His power is an unquenchable desire for justice.
There you go. And finally, what show are you currently marathoning right now on Netflix or Hulu, whichever you use?
Which show am I currently marathoning? Bob's Burgers.
I can get
Bob's. I mean,
it's so good.
I caught up like on the night of,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't really marathoning. It was just 3 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And Stranger Things I did over like just the span of 3 days, basically. So that one was. Right now it's Bob's Burgers, and I've just begun my love affair with that show.
It's so good.
Yes.
I realized I forgot one question also. So this is the real and finally, what's your favorite internet video? Is it the seal on the boat?
No.
Only people who listened to Levitard last week would know that joke about it.
Yeah, I'm a noted seal hater.
Oh, man.
Favorite internet video? I would say probably the one I've gotten the most laughter from, and this was probably when I used to watch The Soup with Joel McHale, was the dramatic squirrel.
Okay. Squirrel. Yeah.
That was probably the funniest. But yeah, there's some painful videos, man.
Oh yeah.
Ones that make you cringe. But I'd say that one. That's probably the most memorable one.
Drink of choice.
Alcoholic beverage of choice?
Either one.
Well, I don't want to say wine because that's kind of more of a dinner thing. I'm kind of a vodka soda drinker these days.
All right.
Nothing spectacular. I do like a champagne cocktail every now and then, like a good little. Nothing as simple as a mimosa, but nothing too crazy complicated. Just a little bit of bubbly involved.
So maybe like a black velvet with some Guinness involved?
No, something a little simpler. Like nothing really that's well known. Like for example, like I'll just look up something and whether it be like a little bit of Grand Marnier or something with the champagne, just a little bit of mixture in there, but nothing crazy.
All right. Israel, thank you very much for joining me again. You can follow him on Twitter at Izzy Gutierrez. Make sure you check out George and Izzy weeknights from 9 to 11 on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app. Thank you very much for your time. You can follow me on Twitter at Chase Bunker. You can also follow my video game podcast on Twitter at _game_show. And make sure you like us on Facebook, facebook.com/thatnewshow. Feel free to leave a like. If you have any questions down below, feel free to leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Also, feel free to subscribe because, I kind of need them. So, other than that, on behalf of for Izzy Gutierrez, I am Chase Bunker. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.